friends, it's Christy. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be making a card using some Sweet November stamps, including a Fairwee Summer Picnic, Horizon Lines Waterfall Foliage, and a Fairwee Summer Picnic expansion pack. So I stamped my images out on a piece of Spectrum Noir Ultra Smooth Premium White cardstock with Lawn Fawn Jet Black ink, and then I created some masks for the main images. And I did that using some Inkadinkado masking paper, which I have had in my stash for, I don't know, maybe 10 years. I've had it a really long time. So I'm going to mask off the fairies, and then I'm going to stamp a few additional images. I also masked off the blueberry so that I could continue to stamp my scene. And then I'm taking these little bushes from the waterfall foliage stamp set. I'm also going to add a strawberry slightly overlapping the blueberry, and then a little cup next to the fairy on the left. I'll close the door of my MISTI to pick those up, and then I'll ink those up and stamp them down. So I wanted to include the masking on today's card because it's not something that I do on my channel very often. In fact, I can't remember if I've ever done it on this channel. If I have, it's been many years. But what you want to do is stamp down the images that you want to be in the forefront first, and then mask those off and stamp down the images that you want to be in the background, and then it's going to look like those images are peeled back. And I'll kind of pick this one off and show you what that looks like. So you can see that because I stamped those fairies first and then stamped the bushes after the fairies were masked, it pushed those bushes back behind them. So that's what you want to do. I got a little bit of ink on the bottom of the scene when I was peeling off the mask for the blueberry. So I'm going to grab my Tombow Mono sand eraser and just work on that until I've removed the most of the ink. There's still a tiny bit of it showing there, but it's kind of hard to see in the final card once you get all the coloring on there. So once that was done, I created masks for all of the images except the bushes. I would have done the bushes too, but I ran out of masking paper. So I decided to just let them be. I kind of wish I had figured out another way to mask them off, just because the lines, the black stamped lines, aren't really crisp in the end scene. But I think because they're in the background, it ends up being fine. Also, I don't recommend coloring with Copics over Distress Oxide inks, but I did it for today's card. But if you can mask off all of the images in the scene, I would definitely recommend that. So I'm using my Lawn Fawn Cloudy Stencil and some Salvage Patina Distress Oxide ink to create a nice sky. I wanted it to be just a beautiful, gorgeous day in this fairyland. So these little fairy girls can be having a picnic out in the meadow. So I'm just continuing to blend that Distress Oxide ink on and going down 3 times so that I have a nice wide sky. Then I'm going to switch up and bring in some Twisted Citron, and I started out just working that in without any stencil. I was just going to kind of fill that in, but it kind of didn't seem to have like a nice crisp edge like I wanted it to. So I'm going to end up grabbing a stencil in just a minute to kind of help with the definition of the hill. But I just brought that Twisted Citron in from the sides and the top where I wanted the hill. Then I grabbed the MFT Drift and Hills stencil, and I found one that was kind of in the orientation that I wanted it to be. And then I'm going to come in with some Mowed Lawn Distress Oxide ink, and I'm going to start on the stencil and then blend down, and that's going to give me a much nicer crisp edge that's going to look like a hillside. So I blended that on until I was happy with it, and then I'm going to go back to my Twisted Citron and bring that color down and just fill in any of the remaining white space down there. Then I'll lift that stencil so you can see that hillside, and I'll begin to peel off all of my masks to reveal the little scene behind. I did save all of the little backings in my Twiddler's Nook embellishment tray off to the side, and then I added those little masks to the backing so that I can save them and create other scenes in the future. So I'm just going to get this last one off there, and you can see that everything is so nice and crisp underneath. So now I'm ready to do my Copic coloring, and you could also do the Copic coloring first and then mask your images, but I find the background much quicker to do, and I don't want to accidentally mess something up after I've done all the coloring. So I prefer to do the background first and then the coloring after, just because, you know, then I know that the scene is going to work out, hopefully. So I'm going to start with the bushes since they were kind of bothering me because they had that cloud detail in there. I want to get rid of that as quickly as possible so I can start to see the scene come together. I'm doing them in some darker greens so that it covers up any of that salvage patina behind. So I chose G40, G43, and G46. And I'm just going to quickly do all three of those, adding that G46 down at the bottom of the smaller bush, and then all around that on the larger bush, kind of casting a shadow to the one behind, so it has some definition on the edges there. And then I'll blend up with the G46 and use the G40 at the top. The G40 is still really light, so I'm going to add some additional detail in just a little bit. But first I'm just going to finish off this bush over on the right hand side. So the Sweet November stamps are designed by my friend Amy Young, who is an absolutely amazing Copic colorist. I have been following her since almost when I started, like maybe 11 or 12 years now. She is just fabulous. She doesn't have a YouTube channel, but she does have a page on Facebook called Adventures in Coloring with Amy, and she does Facebook Lives on there where she will color some beautifully detailed scenes. She's also the illustrator for Sweet November stamps, and these little fairwees she has been drawing for such a long time, and I just think they're so adorable. So I'm super happy to be guest designing with her today. So I did take the G28 and add some dot detail in there just to create some little leaf foliage, and then I added some more with the G46, and then I went in with the G43 and kind of colored back over them a little bit to kind of knock them back just a little bit more and make them look more integrated into those bushes. So you can see that the coloring did cover up all of that Distress Oxide, so it was totally fine, but you still can tell the difference between the images that were masked off and the bushes that weren't, because the black line is much crisper on the masked images. So that is why I still would recommend masking them all if you can. But now I'm going to go in with the G46 and the G28 and just add a few little flicks of grasses here and there. The bushes, especially the one in the center, was kind of leaning a little bit off the hill, so I wanted to hide that with a little bit of grass, and I just decided to bring it forward in the scene as well. Just did little flicks of 2s and 3s. Some of my Copic caps I didn't realize were a bit out of screen, so I'm going to add the numbers to the screen when they're hard to see. But for the skin, I chose E000, E00, and E11. I was going to do the second fairy different, but I got a little bit nervous about how long this video was going to be, so I decided to just do them both the same because it was a lot quicker. So I'm starting with that E11 and just adding a little bit of shadow under their hairline, casting that down on their face because they're both wearing those beautiful big hats, and those would be casting shadows on their faces as well. And then to the backs of their arms and their legs. And I did like a little line where their ankle would be just to add a bit more definition. And then I blended that out with the E00, and then I came in with the E000 and filled in all the rest of that white space. So I'll just finish up on the second fairy as well. And I'll give them both some rosy cheeks with R11 and R20. Just use the R20 first, and then I'll go around the edges of that with the R11, which just softens it into the skin tone. And then I'm going to move into the first fairy's hair. I'm going to be doing them both different just to give you some more options with hair colors. For the fairy on the left with her braid, I'm using E33, E35, E57, and E29. And I'm starting with my lightest shade, the E33, and flicking in where I want my darkest shades to go. Then I'm going in with the E35 and adding even more depth, and then the E57, and then finally my darkest shade, the E29, which is going to get quite dark, but I'm still keeping it concentrated really low where that braid comes together. And then I'll work my way back up in the reverse using that E57 and then the E35, bringing that color a little bit higher each time. And then the E33 is going to be my final shade. My second fairy is going to be a redhead. I have lots of redheads in my family, so I thought it would be fun to try that. I haven't done one in a while. I chose YR12, YR14, E15, and E17. I first did an all over layer with the YR12, and then I started going in with some dot detail to try to create the look of curls. I'm going to change my mind in just a bit and do something slightly different, but for now I'm just continuing all the way up to that E17, adding those tiny little dots, and then I will work my way back down in the reverse again. So just like with the bushes, that's going to help it get a little bit softer so the dots won't be quite so prominent. But I still didn't think they really looked like curls, so I went back in with the E17 and then decided that I needed something a little bit different because it just wasn't doing it for me. So I'm going to grab a fifth shade, which is going to be the E29, which I also used as my darkest on the other little girl. And I'm going to do little tiny like half circles to do that little curl look. And then I'll go over that with the YR12 to soften that into the rest. And I like that much better. So switching back to the fairy on the left, I wanted to do her hat next, and I decided to make it look kind of like a straw hat. So I went with E50 and E51. Just added a little bit of shading with that E51 first, and then I began to blend that out toward the edges with the E50. There wasn't quite enough contrast, so I did go back to the E51 and add a little bit more of that, just creating some more depth. And then I'm moving down to her dress. I wanted it to be a nice sunny yellow, so I chose Y11, Y13, and Y15. Starting with the Y15 and adding a little bit of pleating to her sleeve. I wanted it to look like it was nice and puffy, like Anne of Green Gables, puff sleeves. And then I also added a little bit of definition to the outside edges of her dress. And then I went over that with the Y13, just going right over the very edge of that Y15 so I get a nice soft blend. And then I'll fill in the rest with the Y11. I wasn't sure how I wanted to do her bloomers, so I skipped those for now, and I did her hat band to match And I also did the center of the flower with the Y15. Decided that wasn't quite dark enough, so I pulled in the Y17 as well. And I also dotted that into the center of the flower on the other fairy's hat. While I had my yellows out, I wanted to do the wedge of cheese that is in the little leaf basket, and I also decided to make that what the ladybug is holding. So I used Y000 and Y11, and then added in a touch of E41 just to make it a little bit duller, and also used the E41 for the top of the cheese so it could be like a wedge of brie. And then I decided to go ahead and do that fairy's bloomers in yellow, but I wanted them to be slightly lighter than her dress. So I used the Y000, Y11, and Y13 for those. For the flower on her hat, I wanted to add like a peach tone to the centers of the petals. So I chose R01, and then I'm going to darken that up with some R11. And I'm just keeping that close to the center, and I want it to fade off to the white at the tips. And I'm actually going to add a little bit of the Y000 to the tips just to give them a little bit of something extra and pull it into her dress. Then I took BG70 and added just the barest hint of color to the fairy wings, and then I'm going to make them look transparent by going in with my lighter greens. So I'm using the G40 right now and kind of just sketching in the shape of the bushes that would be behind them and also the hill. So then I'm going to darken up the part that is supposed to be the bushes with the G43 so that the G40 can be just the grass. So I just went over the edge of the G43 with the G40, and now they look like you can see right through them. Next I'm going to take B41, B52, and B45, and I'm also going to throw in a B000. I'm going to take the B000 and just do a little bit of color on the fairy on the right's dress. I wanted there to be just a little bit of an undertone there of the blue. And then I forgot to add a little G40 to her other wing, so I did that quick while I noticed it. And then I'm going to give her a little plaid dress, almost like Dorothy's from The Wizard of Oz. So I'm taking that B45 first and following the curve of her dress, I'm just drawing some stripes from the top to the bottom. And then I'm going to go in the horizontal and add some additional stripes. I'm spacing them far enough apart that I can get some more stripes in there with another shade. So once I'm done with that, I will grab the B52, which is my next lightest, and I'm going to kind of go in between those stripes and add little extra ones to make it a much finer check. So to do that, I'm just making sure to use the very tip of my marker and very light pressure so I can get a super fine line. Then I'll color her bloomers to match, starting with that B45. I'm just going to do them solid and then blend it out with the B52. And I'm going to use those shades for the blueberries as well. So I have the one over on the left and then the one in the leaf tray I'm also going to do as a blueberry. So I used the B45 first and then blended toward the top with the B52 and then the B41. And then I wanted the hat to match but not be exactly the same. So I went with B00 and blended out with that B000. So it's just a little bit of a lighter shade. Then I'm going to color my strawberry using R24, R29, and R39. And I'm going to color right over the little seeds because it's just way easier on this design, and I'll add them in later with a white gel pen. I'm also going to do the band on the Fairy on the Right's hat with those reds. I thought it would be nice to have that bright pop over there carried over to the top right of the card. And then I'm also going to do the ladybug's shell. At first I only did the R29 and the R24, but I did go back and add that R39 in there. For the raspberries, I decided to use RV66, RV69, and RV99. So I'm just adding a little dot of that RV99 on each little section, and then I'm blending that out with the RV69. Just quick little dots, and then I'll fill in the rest with the RV66. So I get that nice kind of raspberry reddish purple. And then because I wanted to have that color one other place on the card, I decided to do the little drink cups, but I wanted it to be slightly lighter since they're super small. So I took away the RV99 and added in the RV63. So it's very similar in tone, but just has a little bit more highlight on it. And then I brought in E44 to color in their coffee or cocoa. For the tops of my berries, I went back to my G46 and G28, and I'm also going to do the leaf that is forming their little picnic lunch there, and also on the little flowers on the Fairy on the Right's hat. So I used the G28 first and then blended out with the G46, and on everything except for that leaf, that was enough because they were super small little areas, but I did pull in the G43 for the center of that leaf. And then I thought my images needed a little bit of shadow beneath them to ground them into the scene so they don't look like they're just floating there. So I took that G43 and added a little shadow underneath everything. And then I'm going to blend that out in just a minute. You could also use some grays, but I just wanted to keep this scene really cheerful, so I thought the greens would work better. And then I'm taking that G40 and just coloring over the edge of the G43 to soften that into the rest of the grass on this hillside. And I just realized I never did color the top of that strawberry stem, so I'm going to have to go back and do that. I don't know how I forgot it, but anyway. I'm going to move on to the flowers on the Fairy on the Right's hat, and I chose R20 and R22 for those. Just added a little bit of color to the centers and left the rest of them white. I did bring in R11 to soften the edge of that pink, and I had missed a leaf, so I went back to my G46 for that. And then for the rest of my ladybug, I'm using C3, C5, and C7. I had my colors out of order, so I just fixed those. But I started with the C7 and added a little bit of definition to the head and the spots and the belly. And then I blended out with the C5 and filled in the rest with the C3. And I forgot his little hands and feet as well, but I did go back and get those later on. So there is our scene. I'm going to trim that down with one of the MFT A2 Stitch Rectangle Stacks Set 2. And then I'm going to pop that in my MISTI so I can stamp my sentiment. I'm using VersaFine Onyx Black ink. And I'm stamping the sentiment that came with the A Fair Wee Summer Picnic expansion pack, which says, "It's a good day to have a good day." I'm going to move that magnet aside carefully so I don't accidentally smear that sentiment, and then I will pop my card base in my MISTI. I'm using a piece of snow cone cardstock from MFT and stamping in Lawn Fawn Peacock ink. And for this one, I'm just going to do an image. I'm not going to have a second sentiment on the inside because I'm not really sure what I want to use this card for just yet. So I can always add a sentiment later on once I know, because the good day to have a good day sentiment on the outside could go for a variety of different occasions. I'm going to add some pattern paper using the Echo Park Slice of Summer 6x6 pad. So I'm just flipping through and trying to find a print that I think will work well with our scene. So I went through and found a floral print that I thought was going to be really pretty to use. It's this one here in the front of the pad. So I'm going to tear that out. And then I also did choose a second print just to kind of break up some of the floral. I decided to go with yellow because that would tie in to the first fairy's dress. So I'm going to glue those to my card front. I trimmed those down with the same die set. I used the second smallest for the focal panel and the largest for the pattern paper. So I'm just using my Tombow Mono multi-glue and gluing the floral print down in the center and then the yellow strip across the center horizontally. And then I'm going to bring in my focal panel, which I've added some foam tape to the back too. So I'm going to just peel off the release papers and then I will line that up in the center of the card. Make sure that it is all equal on all four sides, and then I'll press that down into place. As a finishing touch, I'm going to add a little Stardust Stickles. I'm going to put it in the flower centers and also up the little lines that are drawn on the flower petals. My bottle got a little bit of a clog in it right about here, so I had to take it off to the side and use a pin to unclog that. And then I'm going to add some to my berries and also the little berries in the little leaf basket, to the cheese, and to the sides of the cups and the flower centers on the other fairy's hat. And I also decided to add it to their wings just to have a little bit of glitter there as well, because this is a scene with fairies. It needs to have lots of sparkle, in my opinion. So once the glitter was done, I'm going to take a white gel pen and just add those little strawberry seeds back in, just dotting those over the little black drawn lines there. I removed a little bit of that stickles so I could get down a little bit further. And that's when I realized I forgot to do the hands and feet of the ladybug, so I went back and did those quick. And that's going to complete this card. I hope you guys will check out the new release from Sweet November Stamps. I'm going to have another video for you guys later this week sharing another scene that I created. But the release is just full of adorable images, so I'll have a link down below for you to check that out. If you enjoyed this one, please be sure to hit that like button and subscribe. Ring that notification bell so you don't miss any future videos. I post new ones every Monday and Friday, and occasional bonus videos as well. If you'd like to keep watching, here are 2 extra videos I thought might also interest you. You can click on either one to check them out. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you all have an absolutely amazing day. Bye-bye.